Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. Now, budget padding is really not new in Nigeria, but what is new is that this time it is the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning that is on the spot over the issue. Now, reports say the ministry allegedly inserted projects amounting to 423.8 billion naira in the 2023 budget proposal of some ministries, departments and agencies. Now, it's not new because in the past, cases of alleged budget padding were mainly leveled against federal lawmakers. So this time, it's different, and federal lawmakers are not taking it lying low at all. They have raised concerns about the abuse of the budget process following submissions by some government agencies that some amounts were inserted into their estimates without their knowledge, allegedly by the Ministry of Finance. Now, officials of the National Universities Commission, NUC, Ministries of Defense, Power and Humanitarian Affairs during ongoing National Assembly budget hearings disowned some line items now running into billions of naira in their 2023 budget proposals. For instance, 12 billion naira was allegedly inserted in the NUC budget. 10.8 billion was also found in the budget of the Ministry of Defense, and then the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs also disowned the sum of 206 billion naira insertion in her ministry's budget. In the case of the Ministry of Power, 195 billion naira was found in the ministry's budget for no reasonable explanation. The ministers, however, told lawmakers that they could not explain what the sums are meant for or the details of the project tied to the funds, since they were not part of their proposals sent to the Finance Ministry for the 2023 fiscal year. They blamed the Finance Ministry for allegedly inserting the money into their budgets. Well, this is quite, to be candid, this is unheard of. Now being joined on the program by two gentlemen. I have Lanre Suraj, who, of course, is an anti-corruption activist. He joins us from Abuja. And I also have Nasir Kura, who joins us from Kano. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. Let me start with you, Mr. Kura. What do you make of this? Help us to make sense of this. How does one explain this?
Well, it's simply a clear case of fraud, economic irresponsibility, and perhaps impunity at this critical stage of Nigeria's political transition, and to some extent, its own economic, challenges also that are further accentuated, the crisis of development, and one, it shows the lack of respect for due processes on the part of the executive, and also a determination to continue with these processes, these acts that are perhaps at best, anti-democracy, inimical to our economy, and perhaps that are withholding our development as an economy and as a nation. So this put together is, to some extent, this put together is what we can say can explain this madness that we are experiencing, this level of impunity, this economic irresponsibility on the part of our own executives.
Let me come to you, Lanre. Just as I said, this is nothing new, but in the past, it's always against the lawmakers. It's the lawmakers who are accused of inserting or padding up the budget, inserting projects and all of that. But this time, the Ministry of Finance is being accused. And you listen to some of the explanations now given by some of these ministers, you get the impression that this is like the civil servants now doing their own thing, because obviously from what we're gathering now, it's actually the civil servants who prepare the budgets anyway.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I should say that, yeah, Fish, this is actually a welcome development. It is part of that situation where you can get some good out of a bad situation. The bad situation is that of this government that is, I think, is in the history of Nigeria, the most unorganized, the most disjointed, the most uncoordinated government that Nigeria has ever experienced. And in the midst of that is what you're seeing, where the ministers usually don't agree. Even after they leave the same Federal Executive Council meeting, they grant press interview and interaction, saying two different things, speaking on the same issues from different opposing point of view. So that has actually now, for Nigerians, escalated to the point where we're seeing this level of exposing, and we should really take it seriously. It's also an indication that things are not going well anymore for many of the politicians and the civil servants. So either it is through some of the internal mechanisms that are playing out. For them, usually where you would have the normal practice of budget padding from many of the individual ministries, it is now being escalated either through some of the civil servants in those ministries, working with the ones in the Ministry of Budget and National Planning, to have the padding done at that end when the prying eyes of either the minister or the others will not be there. And for us, we should commend the National Assembly. This is the expectation of us from the National Assembly. This is their statutory duty and responsibility. So for them to have picked out some of these padded sections of the budget, they deserve some measure of commendation, and we would want them to keep this up. We wouldn't want to see a situation where this will either be swept under the carpet, or they will also become accomplices by getting a share of whatever it is that is started in the budget illegally, for them to eventually pass them.
Lanre, you look at all of this. I mean, the Ministry of Finance been mentioned in this. It's just a mess.
I mean, this is the most disappointing thing. The minister are pleased on the ranking of the ministerial list of President Buhari. She actually ranks amongst the few, I think you can say to some extent, remarkable ones.
But I must add very quickly that the ministry has denied any form of budget padding at all. And of course, we'll just have to wait until the minister comes before members of the National Assembly to explain what has happened. But then it's still not good at all that, a padded budget would be presented by her ministry to the National Assembly.
Yeah, so it is not just going to be for her to come out. It is going to be important for both herself and President Buhari actually to get to the root of this. This would actually have to not just get to the root of it. There must be those that must be used as scapegoats to send a signal to those who would want to perpetrate this kind of, heinous act against the government. You're talking about over 400 and something billion naira. This is not just something that is to be allocated for some white elephant project. These are monies that are just inserted for the purpose of stealing and also corruption. So some people are sitting down somewhere and trying to get, 460 billion naira out of an annual budget. I mean, that would possibly resolve many of the lingering crises that we have in our universities. That would go a long way in providing enough of power generated for some areas that are not accessible to power. You would also be talking about very good roads and also our medical services, if this should go to any one of them. And there must have been a lot of that. And that's why it is very easy for civil servants to be fingered. Look at what happened with the former Accountant General with Ahmed Idris. And you're talking about billions or almost trillion of naira, as over 700 million naira worth of asset was also seized from this. Another former Accountant General, Otunla, the one that came long before Ahmed Idris. So it tells you clearly that the issue many times is not just about politicians, and it is more even of our civil servants and bureaucrats than even our politically exposed persons.
And that is why it will be very difficult to deal with corruption, because most times we tend to look at the politicians, we forget the civil servants, and these civil servants are always there. A government comes and goes, the civil servants are always there, and because they're always there, corruption will continue.
No, the truth is that there's no politician, there's no politically exposed person that can succeed in any form of corrupt transaction or dealing without the conspiracy of the civil servants. And that's number one. Number two, the civil servants actually also lead the politicians on to some of those acts. So in fact, sometimes some ministers who will refuse to play ball becomes even victims in the hands of these civil servants. There are quite a number of people even call them evil servants because of the evil nature of some of the things that are perpetrated. So the law enforcement agencies, ICPC and EFCC, have a whole lot of work to do in probing into the lifestyle of many of the civil servants. I think we've done sufficiently with the politicians, so we need to just cut also some time out and focus on the civil servants, both at the state and also federal level, and see how much of what we can recover from that process and system.
Okay. Nasir, you look at our fight against corruption. We've always focused on politicians, but the truth is that, look, civil servants would appear to be the bigger problem because they're always there. And this budget padding we're talking about now could not have happened without the civil servants. And it's very glaring now that they actually prepared the budget. So don't you think it's time we began to shift serious focus now and look at the civil servants, especially in the light of what we saw with the former Accountant General of the Federation?
Exactly. Now, beyond that also, I think that we need to re-emphasize our earlier campaign for freedom of information. And for over a decade now, the campaign in civil society parlance has been for freedom of information from government and its annual activities. And this has been persistently resisted by these civil servants, even when legislations are made, even when progress is made. Hardly will these civil servants key in to this, noble cause for, one, transparency in government, transparency in economic activities. They always kick against it. And I think this should be our now major campaign issue. For us, outside the purview of governance, for us outside the structures of the state, our campaign has always been that Nigerians and those who are interested need to be informed about happenings in the ministry. One, even the issue of the budget in itself, before you even come into party, not every agency allow for people to monitor, their budget making, their budget proposal, not to talk of seeing their own contribution or seeing their own input. Now, some of us at some level and in some key instances have participated in budget monitoring. And if you pick the budgets across the states for say 2, 3, 4, 5 years, if you pick them up, you will see, one, that there is no difference between what was proposed in terms of road projects, in terms of school provisions, in terms of hospitals construction, in terms of infrastructural provisions in virtually all the states in the last 2, 3 years. So I'm saying projects that ought to have been ended in a year or two have been dragged for about 3 to 4 years. Reasons One is pardon. Second is also outright stealing by the civil servants. So I think that I strongly also share the view that our focus should now be shifted more on the activities, of these civil servants in different ministries. I also agree to that in total.
Landry, you look at the population of the civil service of this country, quite not much, but they control so much. They control so much and they control government, whether or not we like it. Now, let's not forget, this is just a budget proposal. Now, I want to believe this is what would normally happen. This is just a budget proposal, and usually after every budget proposal, when it comes to release of funds now, not all of the monies will be released. But then, because these civil servants are in charge, when monies are released, one of the first things they tend to do would be to sort out those areas that they had actually padded first before they begin to talk about. Is that actually what happens?
Exactly. I mean, unfortunately, if you listen to the response of the Humanitarian Affairs Minister, she made it clear that even the budget for 2022 of about 20 billion that was there for the ministry has not even been released by the Ministry of Finance, much less where now over 200 billion has been surreptitiously inserted in their budget without their knowledge. I mean, so this, you can tell quite a number of them. If you come to Abuja now, many of the hotels are like fully booked. Activities are almost like on daily basis with different ministries and departments and agencies of government, because this is the last minute when quite a number of those activities are hurriedly implemented, when there will be little oversight monitoring, and because it's almost coming to the end of the year, and they use the excuse of, oh no, we need to just expend some of those budgetary provisions before the next fiscal year. Also, for that reason, December is usually, I mean, it's known in Abuja generally, is usually the period for the civil servants, ministries, departments, and agencies to spend most of the money. And that is where quite a whole lot of, the diversion, the corruption, and mismanagement do happen. So I know that something must have really changed between how it is done before now, where it would have been padded from the ministry. We've had reasons here to know before where some ministries, I think even the National Human Rights Commission, the ICPC complained at some point that some things, provisions in terms of buying maybe motorcycles and whatever, were inserted in their budget without their knowledge. That was actually played at the doorstep of the parliamentarians. So now it is moved from padding at the ministry level and now to the Ministry of Finance. So what it means is we need to also understand and check, as the padding at the individual ministry, department, and agency has stopped, or this is even the escalation of an addition to the padding that must have started from the ministries. Now the Ministry of Finance have added its own. So at the end of the day, the real budget that Nigeria is implementing or requiring will possibly be around 60 to 50% of the actual budgetary provision and allocation. The other percentage is just pilfered between the civil servants and the politicians. So when we don't get the real face value of our annual budgetary provisions and budgetary approval, when you consider the atrocities that are committed by many of the other implementers that are associated with the budget.
Okay, on a final note now, Nasser, I mean, when a minister appears before members of the National Assembly now, and who are asking that minister why setting amount wasn't, what setting amount of money is meant for in the minister's budget, and then the minister says, I'm not aware. I mean, it clearly shows the budget document that the lawmakers have might be different from what the minister has. How does one explain that?
Yeah, That goes to show that, one, it has been always, an act that has been carried out by the civil servant in both ministries and other government parastatals, and then finally the Ministry of Finance, to the extent that those responsible for the final copy, production of the final copy of the budget proposals, are in one way or the other capable of, being complicit in this, odious and perhaps, criminal act. And also, we need to check further with those responsible at the different ministries and parastatals, those civil servants that are also saddled with the responsibility of, one, drawing up and submitting this budget, and their counterparts, in the Federal Ministry of Finance. And it is not just enough for the minister to say, okay, I don't know. The minister ought on her own, collect after need to have gone peruse through what was presented to the National Assembly. It is through that process that the minister will be able to understand whether items were inserted or items were, removed from the proposals that are the copy she has. Now, having done so, one other thing that I think that I will, advise that we take very seriously is the input of civil society organizations at these levels, particularly beyond the observer status they are given, in the National Assembly. They also need to be beyond observation. They also need to be given some, opportunities to ask one or two questions that will aid and, the process. Not doing that will further, embolden the civil servant, knowing fully well that it is between them and, the elected representatives. I go back to, and this brings me to my earlier point. This thing has been going on since the beginning of this democracy. And I think we need to be serious about it. We need to ensure that, because all these things come up because all this development rear themselves, bring itself up because we have a transiting assembly. The National Assembly is also, 2023 election is coming up. And perhaps they will need to expose this and make this exposure because they are not sure if they are going to benefit, from the output, this particular party. So that's why they now quickly blow the whistle, because knowing fully well that not many of them, not all of them are going to benefit. And so therefore they now quickly raise, blow the whistle for the ministry and the civil servants. So we need to, at this juncture, like I said, one, strengthen the institutions of democracy, particularly civil society organizations and journalists. We need to agitate for a space in the National Assembly, not just an observer status space, but an observer status with a limited mandate that will give them the opportunity to raise and ask questions when such budgets are presented or are about to be presented, or when ministries are asked to come out to defend their budgets before the National Assembly.
I get your point. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program and for sharing your thoughts with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we'll take a short break now and we'll be right back. Don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.